I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily Week in Review. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is kicking off 2 days of talks at the United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow. He joins over 120 other world leaders. The COP26 Climate Convention will mark Canada's first steps toward capping emissions from the oil and gas sector. Canada's largest target is to have 40 to 45% fewer emissions than in 2005 by 2030. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says Canada will donate 10 million doses of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine to the COVAX vaccine sharing facility.
The announcement that 10 million doses from Moderna that we have ordered will go straight from Moderna to COVAX is significant.
She says Canada will donate 200 million vaccine doses by the end of next year. Vaccine equity was a hot issue on the table at the G20 summit in Rome, and there were warnings from the IMF and the WHO, among others, that inequitable distribution of vaccines will postpone the global economic recovery. Well, Novavax has submitted its COVID-19 vaccine for approval by Health Canada. The U.S. biotechnology company's submission includes clinical data from a trial of 30,000 participants in the U.S. and Mexico. It says the trial found 100% protection against moderate and severe disease and over 90% efficacy overall. A new study is making the case for active screening for tuberculosis. This especially among Inuit communities where the rate of the infection is much higher than in the rest of Canada. The study was conducted by McGill University researchers. It estimates that one round of active screening among Inuit populations reduced tuberculosis disease by 13% in 2019. It suggests biennial screening would decrease incidence rates by 59%. A tale of two boards made it to the BC Supreme Court today. The battle for control of Rogers Communications has publicly pitted members of the Rogers family against one another. A petition filed by Edward Rogers last week asks the court to legitimize a board he formed after being ousted as chair last month. His mother, sisters, and their associates say the only valid board is the one that existed prior to Mr. Edwards' changes. University researchers and drug developers in Edmonton are joining forces to seek a solution to Canada's inability to create its own drug supply. Advanced Pharmaceutical Innovation is a nonprofit which employs about 40 scientists at its Edmonton facility. It is teaming up with the University of Alberta's renowned Li Ka-shing Institute of Virology to form the Canadian Critical Drug Initiative. Heather Stephenson will soon be sworn in and become Manitoba's first ever female premier. Ms. Stephenson scored a narrow victory over rival Shelley Glover on the weekend for the leadership of the governing Progressive Conservatives. However, Ms. Shelley Glover is challenging the result. She is calling for Heather Stephenson's swearing in to be delayed, this in order to contest the result in court. Starting today, Quebec bars and restaurants can operate at full capacity and resume normal hours. This comes more than a year after limits were imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. Establishments that serve alcohol will now be allowed to stay open until 3 a.m. And the distance between tables will drop from 2 meters to 1 meter. Quebecers are still required to present their vaccine passport before entering and wear masks when moving around indoors. The ban on dancing and singing remains in effect until further notice. The leader of the official opposition in New Brunswick says Premier Blaine Higgs should be locked in a negotiating room with striking CUPE workers, not locking them out. Roger Melanson says the government is trying to punish the employees rather than trying to settle on adequate wages and benefits. Schools across the province moved to online learning today. This after the government locked out non-designated school employees in 2 CUPE locals due to the strike. A vaccination clinic and some COVID-19 screening were also cancelled over the weekend. The Royal Canadian Legion's Poppy campaign is bringing back payments from tap-enabled devices or cards. This as well as digital poppies that can be purchased online and shared on social media. That's in addition to the more than 34,000 traditional poppy boxes across the country. The Poppy campaign's mission is to raise money to support veterans and veteran assistance programs. Well, meanwhile, the mother of a soldier killed in Afghanistan 12 years ago has been named this year's Silver Cross Mother by the Royal Canadian Legion. Josie Simard from Quebec will lay a wreath at the National War Memorial on Remembrance Day. She says the loss of her daughter, Army Corporal Karen Blais, shattered the family, but that her spirit lives on in their memories. 21-year-old Corporal Blais was less than 2 weeks into her first tour of duty in Afghanistan when her armored vehicle was hit by a roadside bomb. The Royal Canadian Legion is hoping that with some pandemic restrictions being lifted in many parts of the country, its annual Poppy campaign will get back to normal this month. Leading up to Remembrance Day, the organization has set up over 34,000 traditional poppy boxes nationwide where people can donate cash and get a poppy pin. The organization is also featuring boxes that will accept payments from tap-enabled devices or cards. This year's campaign is also coinciding with the 100th anniversary of the poppy as a symbol of remembrance in Canada. Mr. Stephen Clark, the National Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion, joins us now to discuss the poppy campaign and how Canadians can get involved. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily News.
Thank you so much, Nima. Glad to be here.
All right, Mr. Clark, can you take us back to when and why the Royal Canadian Legion started the Poppy campaign in the first place?
Absolutely. The origin of the campaign actually predates the organization itself. And we look back to 1915 when Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae wrote his immortal poem in Flanders Fields. It was written out of grief for the passing of a good friend and a fellow soldier. Now, inspired by that poem was a woman named Madame Anna Guérin of France, who later became known as the Poppy Lady from France. She had an inter-allied Poppy Day scheme idea where she thought it would be a wonderful way to raise money for veterans of the First World War, as well help her charity, which was to assist children in war-torn areas of France. So in 1921, she came to Canada, and she presented her idea to the Great War Veterans Association, which is the predecessor of the Royal Canadian Legion, and it was adopted. So Canada's first Poppy campaign took place in November 1921, when 2 million poppies from Madame Guérin were distributed across the country.
Very interesting story, Mr. Clark. Now we're hitting the 100th anniversary of the poppy as a symbol in Canada. So how is the Legion commemorating this anniversary here?
We've done a couple of things. One is we developed a Poppy 100 replica pin. It's based on the actual design that Madame Guérin had first proposed back in 1921. And all Legion members right across the country are available. It's available to them, and they are able to wear that on their uniform, available to anyone as well. We had worked with a couple of external partners, with the Royal Canadian Mint to develop a commemorative coin, with Canada Post to propose and distribute a special commemorative poppy stamp. We also this year, for the first time, developed something called the Immortal Poppy, which is a 3D digital art NFT that's a very unique thing for the Legion to do. And again, we're also offering a digital poppy through mypoppy.ca. And another important thing that we're doing to honor that 100th anniversary is to tell the story of Anna Guérin and Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae.
And why the poppy, sir? What does the poppy symbolize here?
Poppy symbolizes remembrance. It's a very personal expression of remembrance, and also a visual pledge of us saying that we will never forget. Again, we look back at that poem of in Flanders Fields, and that's really a poem of hope. And it's hope by the fallen that future generations will remember what they had done, and their deeds will not be forgotten. That's what the poppy symbolizes: service and sacrifice.
All right, sir, just over a minute left here, but where do the funds raised from the Poppy campaign go?
Important to know that all funds raised provide benevolent comfort and care to veterans and their families and promote remembrance. And the other important thing is all funds that are donated locally stay locally to help veterans in your local municipality.
Some important things to consider there, sir. A minute and a half here, but can you give us a background on the history and mission of the Royal Canadian Legion itself?
Certainly, after the First World War, there were a number of organizations all formed to help veterans, and they quickly realized that there is strength in numbers. So 1925, at the Unity Conference in Winnipeg, the idea of uniting these organizations into one larger group was proposed and adopted. Now, the mission of the Royal Canadian Legion has never changed from that 1925 conference: to serve veterans, their families, to promote remembrance and serve our communities.
All right, Mr. Clark, how can our Canadian viewers support the activities of the Legion?
One of the most important ways you can do is to join the Legion, and you can do that online. During this time of year, please wear a poppy and donate to your local branch's Poppy Trust Fund. You can also donate directly to the Legion online. That helps. We've come through a very difficult time with the pandemic. We're out the other end now. We can certainly use the support and value the assistance provided by the Canadians right across the country.
All right, Mr. Clark, thank you again for sharing your important message here on Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima. My pleasure.
All right, we'll be back after the break with a look at rising dairy prices in Canada. An interview from this week with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, the director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab. The Canadian Dairy Commission is recommending a large hike in farm gate milk prices. And that isn't the only price hike that Canadians are likely to see in their local grocery stores. The Federal Crown Corporation says an 8.4% price increase for processors is expected to be approved by provincial authorities next month. And it will take effect February 1st. Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, the director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, says the retail price of milk in grocery stores could increase by as much as 10%. He says prices for dairy products like butter, cheese, and yogurt could rise as much as 15%. Dr. Charlebois joins us now to talk more on this. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
My pleasure.
Now, you're saying that there could be a 10 to 15% rise in dairy retail prices. What is behind this price increase, sir?
Well, according to the Canadian Dairy Commission, which is a Crown corporation, its job is to protect consumers by providing a fair price to farmers so we can keep some production capacity in the country. That's really what the CDC's role is. And they are justifying the hike by pointing at higher energy cost and higher feed prices as well. And but some numbers were provided. A report was posted, I believe it was on Monday. But again, details are cryptic. We don't have access to raw data. And we don't know if that data was verified by competent authorities or accountants. So it's always been that way for 53 years. So we've come accustomed to the CDC's modus operandi, but now with an 8.4% hike, which is a record, it's almost double the previous record. It got a lot of people concerned.
And we know the price hike for farm gate milk is set to take effect on February 1st. So when will consumers start seeing these price increases in stores?
Well, for fluid milk, almost immediately, basically, because you don't really require processing. As far as dairy products go, you may start seeing prices being adjusted probably in the middle of the winter, end of winter, early spring. For cheese, yogurt, and everything else we buy, you have to appreciate the fact that when it comes to dairy in Canada, the vast majority of dairy products are made in Canada because of supply management. There are high tariffs on import, and we have a quota system, which makes dairy very different than, say, beef, pork, or other products you would buy in a store. And so what happens with dairy prices, if dairy prices go up, it's like the tide. Dairy prices will go up. Eventually, other food items could go up as well. And so even if you don't eat dairy products, this will affect you.
So what other food products do you think will be affected following this, sir?
Well, I mean, let's face it, the 8.4% is not necessarily a shocker, at least for me. We were expecting a high percentage because across the grocery store, you're seeing prices going up right now, except perhaps for produce. Fruits and vegetables have been okay. We have a strong dollar to help us. But generally speaking, we are expecting higher prices in bakery, meat products, at the freezer counter or the freezer aisle as well. So those many sections of the grocery store will be impacted by inflation.
All right, sir, just a little over a minute left, but bringing this back home to our consumers watching this, how will these higher prices affect both consumers at home and the restaurant industry?
Oh, my goodness. Well, what's unclear is how the industry will react. What how processors will react. What has happened in the past is that when they felt that prices were too high, they actually illegally imported dairy proteins from the United States, a quarter of the price. That may happen again. And so prices may not be affected if they do that, but what could happen to the dairy industry is that we could actually reduce quotas and see many farms disappear. As far as restaurants go, I'm very concerned for them. Unless they do the same thing as processors and go south, their costs are going to go up significantly. Pizzerias is a good example. I mean, cheese is a huge part of their food costs, so they're going to have to either adjust their menu prices or reduce the quantity of cheese they put on their pizza or something else.
Well, I'm sure our consumers are not looking forward to that. Dr. Charlebois, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily News.
My pleasure.
We'll be back after the break with more stories from this week. Up next, we look at stories that made headlines and news from around the world. In a surprising move for many, the Bank of England kept interest rates steady. U.S. unemployment benefit claims fell, and Iran marked the 1979 seizure of the U.S. Embassy. These stories and more when we return. Britain is the first country to grant a conditional authorization to pharmaceutical giant Merck. This for its coronavirus antiviral, which is the first pill shown to successfully treat COVID-19. It's intended to be taken at home twice a day for 5 days by people with mild to moderate COVID-19. An antiviral pill that reduces symptoms and speeds recovery could prove groundbreaking. It could ease caseloads on hospitals. This, and it could also help to curb outbreaks in poorer countries with more fragile health systems. The Bank of England has confounded market expectations and held interest rates steady. The decision to keep the bank's main interest rate at 0.1% was a surprise, given the sharp pickup in inflation in recent months. The rate-setting Monetary Policy Committee panel says there's value in waiting for further information in the labor market following the end of the government salary program. The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits fell to a fresh pandemic low last week. This is another sign that the job market is healing after last year's coronavirus recession. Jobless claims dropped by 14,000 to 269,000 last week. Overall, 2.1 million Americans were collecting unemployment checks the week of October 23rd. This is down from 7.1 million a year earlier, when the economy was still reeling from the coronavirus pandemic. The head of a World Health Organization regional office says a 53-country region in Europe and Central Asia faces a real threat in the coming weeks. This is due to the potential resurgence of COVID-19. Dr. Hans Kluge said today that COVID case counts are beginning to near record levels again, and that the pace of transmission in the region is of grave concern. He says region-wide, an average of 47% of people are fully vaccinated. The head of a European Parliament delegation on its first official visit to Taiwan says it is high time for the European Union to step up its cooperation with the self-ruled island, which is also claimed by China. 13 lawmakers from the Parliament's Committee on Foreign Interference in Democratic Processes met with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen. The visit comes amid growing support for the democratic island. China claims it as part of its territory to be annexed by force if necessary. Lebanon's prime minister has again urged his information minister to step down. This comes amid a diplomatic rift with Saudi Arabia and its Gulf Arab allies that threatens to destabilize the new government. The prime minister says the resignation would help resolve the crisis. He can't dismiss the minister without the approval of 2/3 of his cabinet. He also had stern words for his partners in government, the militant Hezbollah group and its allies. They have rejected calls for the minister to resign. Thousands of Iranians have gathered on the streets of Tehran for the anniversary of the 1979 seizure of the U.S. Embassy. The demonstrators gathered and chanted in the commemoration, which typically draws angry crowds. The embassy takeover triggered a 444-day hostage crisis. This, as well as a break in diplomatic relations, that continues today. Tensions have flared in recent months after Iran's election of a hardline president. Ethiopia is marking a year of war against Tigray forces. The war has killed thousands of people and displaced millions since November 2020. It now threatens to engulf the capital. Rival Tigray forces seized key cities in recent days and linked up with another armed group. The government of Africa's second most populous country has declared a state of emergency. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called on citizens to rise up and bury the Tigray forces in a Facebook post. Facebook later removed the post for inciting violence. OPEC and allied oil-producing countries have decided to stick with their monthly plan for cautious monthly increases in oil production. This even as prices surge and the global economy is thirsty for fuel. The OPEC Plus alliance is made up of OPEC members led by the Saudis and non-members led by Russia. On Thursday, the group approved an increase in production of 400,000 barrels per day for the month of December. That's in line with a plan to add that amount of oil to the market every month into next year. Nuclear energy is a sticking point at COP26 talks. Critics decry its price tag, the damage caused by nuclear accidents, and radioactive waste. But a growing pro-nuclear camp argues that it's safer on average than nearly any other energy source, and it's low emission. And they say it is the world's best hope of keeping climate change under control. I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news from this past week.